G'day and welcome to part two of the Aussie Ideas Man, analysing the cretin once more. I'm going to start a little back from where I left off, so let's get into it.
So they brought in people that they felt had more experience and more know-how. And then what happened is they so he was brought in September 2008. They basically ousted Steve Fambro and Chris Anthony in 2009 because Chris and Steve wanted to deliver the APTERA. They decided that they would go after the ATVM loans, and the ATVM loans required a four-wheel vehicle, so they started going after four-wheel vehicles and spent money lobbying to try to get the ATVM loans to cover three-wheeled vehicles. And they spent a lot of time trying to develop a four-wheel vehicle version of the APTERA. This was Paul Wilbur in a Q&A with...
Okay, I spoke a little bit on this. I think I was talking about the fact that the investors originally in APTERA version 1 had plenty of money for them to not even bother going after the government loan. But what I didn't talk about was the accusations that Wilbur and his other experts had been responsible for making APTERA go down the tube. And that is a false accusation. And I say this mainly because all of this is based on the accusation that they spent money on making a four-wheeler. And I have no evidence that they had much more than an idea of switching to a four-wheeler. Has anybody seen a prototype of a four-wheeler? Has anybody seen how much money and work was invested in the four-wheeler? From what I could tell, they were just going full steam ahead with a three-wheeler. The only reason they spoke of a four-wheeler was to hope the government would give them the loan. I could say a lot more about these false accusations, but suffice it to say that these accusations don't have any basis in fact. They are just, well, in a nutshell, probably more lies.
And things haven't changed, right? Light, strong, low capex body. That's the same as it is now. So they had a good product back then. They just didn't bring it to market. And John McElroy seems to think that was not Paul Wilbur's fault, but Paul Wilbur was the CEO at the time, and he made decisions that I think essentially made APTERA not successful the first time around. I don't know if they would have been successful if he didn't make those decisions, like if they just tried to, get the three-wheeled car manufactured. But I think they were kind of in the same space. They had a design. They needed to get money for manufacturing. They could not raise enough money for the manufacturing. And I think Paul Wilbur, and I don't blame him for this decision. I think that it probably seemed like a reasonable decision at the time. He decided the best chance of getting that kind of money was to try to get the ATVM loan. And in order to do that, they needed a four-wheeled car. So they kind of they try to go after that. Anyways, that did not work out, and they had to liquidate in December 2 of 2011. They shut down, and then there was a hiatus of about 8 years, and then in late 2019, APTERA was revived. Okay, so he basically says this thing's a scam, and then I think that is a very loose way of defining a scam. So let's look at what the definition of a scam is. A scam is a fraudulent or deceptive act to deceive or defraud, and fraud is intentional deception to deprive a victim of a legal right or gain from a victim unlawfully or unfairly. Okay, so the difference is, I think John McElroy is saying it's a scam as in like he doesn't think it's going to succeed. I'm going to be generous with him and say that that's what he's saying. But a scam requires intent. Intent is the important thing. So if the founders of a company or if someone that's running a company believes that they can succeed and asks for money for investment to help them succeed, and it does not succeed, that is not a scam, because the people asking for the money truly believe that they could deliver on the product, and they intended to deliver on the product. They just...
Okay, So the cretin's weird logic is that it's not a scam because there's no intent. But the logic falls over because we don't know that there's no intent. It is highly possible that this is a scam because these two snake oil salesmen never intended to produce anything. And there are signs that indicate that. And he is oblivious to all the signs. He's heard them all, but he blocks them out of his mind. There is still the possibility that they have intent to defraud, that they are scamming. There's that distinct possibility. Now, I don't rule it out. I'm not accusing them of it, but I'm not ruling it out. And that's the difference between me and the idiot. This clown has this belief that they have a good intent. I'm saying they say that, but they don't prove it. And by what they're doing all the time, they're not showing it. They are showing things that indicate they are intending to scam. And they do a lot of that. This is the difference. He's discounting something that has no reason to be discounted. This possibility that these snake oil salesmen intend never to build the silly trike. And as I ended in my last one of the biggest indicators of this is the fact that they sold the idea of skin cooling when they knew that it didn't work. They knew. It took them years later, and I'm talking between 2009 when they walked to about 2021, something like that, 2022 maybe, or even later, where Steve Fambro turned around and said, we're not going to do this skin cooling because the technology has not been developed enough. Now, that's too late. That's way too late. That just means that he was selling something that he knew there was not the technology to make it a viable product. Now, that then leans towards indicating that he intended never to make the vehicle. And all of this other stuff is just going along with it. The in-wheel motors, everything, are all going along with the fact that the intent was not there. The change from the composite body to carbon fibre in Italy is one more. That could be an indicator of intent to stall long enough for a planned exit time. All the cretin has got is a blind belief that these guys say, we are genuine, and that becomes fact to him. It's not a fact. I deal in facts, I deal in evidence, and I marvel at his stupidity. But as I've said in comments before, I don't think he's entirely stupid. I think he is greedy. He's got something where he thinks he can make out of it, both on his YouTube site and by the things that they have offered him for free at APTERA. And I believe that that greed and his fairly low level of ethics are the reasons why he says things. And he is deceiving the gullible. Let's keep going.
Did not succeed. So being unsuccessful does not make you a scam. Now, if the founders know that it cannot be succeed, they know that there's no way they're going to succeed, and they are not intending to manufacture a vehicle, and they're not intending to succeed. They're just intending to basically rent seek or get money for themselves when they know full well that it's not going to work. Then that is a scam. Then they are defrauding. Now,
there you go. He can see that the possibility is there, but his blind belief in them just saying they're genuine removes that possibility from his thought processes. And I'm saying what does that is either stupidity or greed and a lack of ethics, or maybe even a combination of both. But he has ruled it out, and there's no reason to rule it out.
I don't know I can't read people's minds, so I don't know what Chris Anthony and Steve Ambrose are thinking, but I am fairly certain that they believe that they can make this thing succeed, and every action that they've done shows that they intend to try to make it to production, and they want to make it to production. They've spent money getting tooling, they've spent money designing, they've spent money getting a supply chain together. That is not what people who intend to defraud people and intend to not produce a thing. That's not what they do. if you want to see someone who's not intending to produce, you can see what Paul Elio did with Elio Motors. There, you can, if you kind of follow their history, there was not much intent to produce anything, and he just paid himself a ridiculous amount of money while he was asking for investments. So that I believe that the actions in that area look like a scam, and the actions of APTERA do not look like a scam. And so I don't think that, and I think that John has some kind of emotional connection to not wanting to cover APTERA.
Here we go. Back to the diversion of John having an emotional connection. Apart from the fact that I've already established that they haven't proved that John is backing a guilty person, I want to mention the poor logic in using Elio as an example to say that APTERA is not guilty. Going away and finding other companies that may be guilty doesn't prove APTERA is not guilty. It's a diversion. This is such a high-level operation, be it a scam or not. It's such a high-level operation that they have the ability to spend a couple of million on the CPC steel and a few million here, there, and other places to convince people that they're intending to build. You have to spend money to make money, and if you're making snake oil, you've still got to buy the bottles. You've still got to buy the label. You've still got to buy the cough medicine and Kool-Aid to mix up something that seems different. You've got to buy those things. You've got to have a manufacturing plant of some sort to offer them in large enough numbers to make profits. There's all that work involved. You have to spend money to make money. Even scammers have to. So he can't use it as an excuse to say they're genuine. And he says, look at all they've done, but he's not looking at all they haven't done. They have not built those 13 production plant stations. They are super expensive. There's where the money is. And they have avoided doing pretty much all of that except for a little on the solar. They have not built up an inventory of anything. I have always been suspicious that they have butchered past prototypes to get parts to make the next prototype. They don't seem to have much at all on those shelving that they bought. It's pretty much an empty warehouse, still, after all these years. There's where the money is. Inventory and production plant machinery. Let's go back to the 50 or so AGMs that were required for that 13 stations. They bought 12, and they bought it with money that was gifted to them. And then they have done nothing in the 4 years or so since they've bought them. They're still nearly 40 short of what they need. Now, I'm certain if I had $120 million to spend, I would have used it in a better way that would have shown that I intend to make a production vehicle. And I wouldn't have mucked around switching things out, like motors and body and just about everything. The way they cool it, even the size of the vehicle, everything seems to change. The suspension changed too many times. They're mucking around. These things are showing or indicating either that they're inept at building the vehicle or they're stalling, and we can't rule out stalling. Stalling to wait for a time to close up shop and disappear.
I don't know how you guys notice this, but just the body language and the tone, it seems very like emotionally charged.
I refuse to report on anything to do with APTERA. When did APTERA come out? When did it first?
6 or 7?
2006 or 7.
Was it that old? Oh yeah.
And they built.
I was writing about it back then. Yeah.
And my buddy Paul Wilbur was brought into the company to straighten it all out, and he did all these things, and then he finally gave up on it. Until they put sellable units on sale and start selling them, I refuse to report on anything to do with APTERA. Remember Elio? Everybody was, oh, Elio, and they brought the General Motor plant. And to me, I have to be careful how I say this. I don't think they're deliberately trying to scam people.
So if you don't think they're deliberately trying to scam people, then it's not a scam. If it's not deliberate, it needs to be intentional for it to be a scam. That is the.
Here's more of his warped logic, and I'm going to end part 2 on this. If you don't think they're deliberately trying to scam people, then it's not a scam. No. If he doesn't think they're deliberately trying to scam people, you can only say that he might be right or wrong, but you can't conclude that it's not a scam. That is wrong. That is silly logic. This guy might be wrong in his thinking, and if he's wrong in his thinking, then it is a scam. If he's wrong, going, oh, they're not deliberate, and he's wrong, then it is a scam. Okay? You can't judge whether it's a scam or not on what this guy thinks, one way or the other. I'll leave it at that. I know logic is beyond the minds of most people, but I'll leave it at that. Listen to what I said last 10 times over until you can understand that the cretin is making or drawing a conclusion that has no logic. So bye for now. I don't know what'll come in part 3, or if I even bother to make a part 3. I've established that the cretin is pretty loopy when it comes to thinking straight, and that's my analysis of him so far. Till next time, stay safe.